Your sales and marketing efforts depend on good data. Good data to be able to segment your database for personalized outreach, or being able to ensure that you can adhere to your clients' communication preferences effectively. And most importantly, so that way you can get your qualified leads and contacts in front of the sales team as efficiently as possible. Here's why your marketing automation platform needs a centralized lead management process now. I'm Xander Broffel, Senior Director of Marketing Operations at CS2. We're a revenue operations agency on a mission to set a new standard for how B2B SaaS companies architect revenue growth. Let's dive in. First of all, what are the common issues that are preventing us from executing a centralized process that works? Over time, we have built a bunch of things in our marketing automation tool: lead sourcing, lead scoring, lifecycle management, data enrichment, and data normalization. And as each of these projects have come in, we've brought them in as individual projects. Typically, these are being triggered throughout your database when people are coming in for the first time or when they are re engaging with you. But it's disordered. There's dependencies between all of these processes. And if we don't have it set up in the right way, we start to stumble on ourselves. Tell me if you've experienced this in the past. Person comes to your website, they request a demo. They come through your process, they get identified as a hot lead or a P1, and we need to get that in front of a sales team's hands as fast as possible. So they sync into Salesforce and they go through your routing process and they get assigned to somebody in territory one. And then 15 minutes goes by and they've now been enriched through a data provider. Their data has been normalized, and we find, oh, what we thought was somebody from Georgia is actually based out of California. And now, as a result, 15 minutes goes by and the record gets changed. Sure enough, the SDR who's working in region one pings out and says, "Why did I get this lead? They actually don't belong to me. They should be belonging to somebody in California." And we've introduced a bunch of friction points into our process because we didn't do the right things up front. So, what is a centralized lead management process? This is very, very simple. What we want to do is we want to architect all of the foundational programs at a global level to ensure that when somebody comes through on a demo request or a content form or comes through a list upload from an event, that they all go through the same process in an orderly fashion, one step at a time. And what's awesome is that all of our marketing automation tools, namely what I would be talking about is Marketo and Hubspot, have ways that you can configure the platform to be able to push people through one step at a time before ever sending them off to your CRM for routing. So, what's included in an order of ops process? Typically, what we do is we would start with lead enrichment. Lead enrichment would be coming in from somebody like Clearbit or Zoom Info, where you have a webhook or some sort of integration within your marketing automation platform. And when they come into the database, the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to call out to that webhook and we're going to give it just 1 or 2 minutes to process through. This is almost always instantaneous, but we always like to build in a little bit of a wait step, a little bit of a buffer in case if you have a large volume of people coming through at the same time. After they've gone through and they get enriched, we're going to call them out into a central process. And in that central process, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting the lead source. We want to understand, where did somebody come from and what did they convert on? And so as a result, you're going to be taking ideally data values from your UTMs and normalizing those into a lead source pattern. So that way we can understand what's taking place from a first touch perspective, as well as populating a most recent data set to tell us what was the last thing that they did. Of course, for the first time that somebody comes into your database, those data values are going to match. But over time, as they start to re engage with you, that data is going to change and is going to shift. And we're going to be able to utilize that most recent data value to tell us a lot more things throughout the process. But before we jump into that too much, we also want to understand, what did they convert on? And so, ideally, what's happening is that when somebody fills out a form, they're going into automation, and we are able to indicate that this is the thing that they specifically converted on. And through an organized process, we're going to populate the most recent value into our original values. And now I can tell you exactly where did they come from and what did they do. Oftentimes, we'll work with clients who want to also understand, like, how did they hear about us? And it's a very common need. And it's something that we've been asking for ages. This is nothing new, but having some sort of how question on a form, maybe you're doing that on your request a demo, you're able to then populate that data into a most recent and an original data value as well, because then you can see how that changes over time. Our perception of how we heard about somebody is usually aligned to what's the thing that had the most impact on us. We go through lead sourcing, and then the next step that we need to be able to do is data normalization. So, as I mentioned before, we've already called out to a data enrichment platform to tell us what's this person's job title, where are they located, um, what's their telephone number, et cetera, et cetera. But oftentimes, we have first party data that we've collected on our forms, and we have third party data that we're getting from a data vendor. And so we want to be able to normalize that. We might want to set aside our source of truth data. We may want the industry values to match to the values that we have in Salesforce. Or maybe we want to account for a variety of data vendors. Maybe we're getting them from from another vendor that is hosting our content, or maybe we're getting it from an event vendor where their country values may not match. Maybe we're getting unstructured data in some sort of capacity that could cause syncing issues. We want to make sure that that gets normalized in this centralized process. So we set data normalization, a bunch of steps to make sure that we have the data cleaned up, and then we utilize that data to now score on. So scoring is the next part of this process. At CS2, we advocate for demographic scoring and behavior scoring, and we actually build that out into a matrix. The advantage of this is that you can take all of that data that's been enriched and normalized and actually build out a scoring model from the demographic grade and tell somebody, are they highly qualified from a what we can see about them, or do they have some work to do? Maybe we don't have the job title. Maybe the job title doesn't necessarily align with our ICP or our key personas. And so what we want to be able to do is in our order of ops process, set that demographic score. In the order of ops process, we also want to set it up so that way we can set the behavior score. As I mentioned earlier, if you're triggering everything off in a very unstructured way, you may not get your behavior score set before you're ready to pass it off into Salesforce. So by controlling it in a centralized controller like we were talking about here, we make sure that we have the right behavior score and the right demographic score. And that can influence what our overall lead rating is. And it moves us into the next step of the process. That leads us into lifecycle management. And we are going to be taking the scoring information that we've gathered and we've previously set in the process, and we will utilize that to understand, is this somebody who's ready for sales to follow up on? Or do they need to sit in their current status of new so that way we can continue to nurture them and bubble them up in the future with additional scoring? So we will build in the lead management process life cycle stage for sales ready, which is what we typically call it. You may have heard of it being called something like an MQL or a marketing qualified lead. We like to structure that out a little bit more broadly in case if there's different go to market strategies that you're trying to employ, whether it be a sales outbound motion, an account based marketing motion, maybe you have a product led growth motion. We want to make sure that that is something that's agnostic and not just dependent on marketing. So now we've gone through, we have lead source, we have data enrichment, we have data normalization, we have scoring, and then we have lifecycle management. All of those pieces are taken care of. Now there's an optional step. We want to make sure that we have the right communication preferences. And so at this point, we might start to call out to our preference center settings. We may call out to our GDPR automation and making sure that that person is set up right at the beginning with all of the necessary information. So that way we can communicate with them efficiently from a marketing automation platform, a sales engagement platform, and then just overall sales engagement, regardless of the tool. All of these pieces are now taken care of, and now we can send it off to the Salesforce CRM in order to be routed to your team. You have the right data at the right time to get it to the right person for quick follow up. And so, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be going through a video series where I will walk you through step by step how to build out an order of ops process, a centralized lead management framework that goes through each of these steps as efficiently as possible. So that way you can have the right process in place and the right architecture in place for the rest of your sales motion to carry on, taking those qualified leads and starting to work them and starting to move through the process to closed won opportunities. The reason why you need to do this in 2024 is unstructured data and poor processes, they have no place on a team that needs to be efficient. And I am sure that right now you are looking at, I have too much stuff to do and not enough time to do it. So get your foundational programs built right to reduce the amount of troubleshooting and questions that you're going to get from the team. Click the link above if you want to learn how to build out the centralized controller of this lead management process.